Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the Star Christ Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 30. We are still on Sacrosanctum Concilium, the document of the liturgy. We're on paragraphs 106 to 108 on revised liturgical year. That's in chapter 5 on the liturgical year for obvious context. So if you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican. Yesterday we talked about fundamental aspects of the annual liturgical calendar, and now we're going to talk about changing the liturgies and what kind of things need to be emphasized for the changes that what Vatican II wanted to bring about in the liturgy, in the liturgical year. So it's going to be 3 paragraphs. They're a little longer, but they're not super complicated. They're pretty straightforward. So paragraph 106 on the importance of Sunday. Let's read it. By tradition handed out from the apostles, which took its origin from the very day of Christ's resurrection, the Church celebrates a Paschal mystery every 8th day. With good reason, then bears the name of the Lord's Day or Sunday. For on this day, Christ's faithful are bound to come together in the place that, by hearing the word of God and taking part in the Eucharist, they may call to mind the passion, the resurrection, and the glorification of the Lord Jesus, and may thank God who has begotten them again through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead unto a living hope. First letter of Peter. Hence, the Lord's Day is the original feast day, and it should be proposed to the piety of the faithful and taught to them so that it may become, in fact, a day of joy and freedom from work. Other celebrations, lest they be truly of greatest importance, shall not have precedence over Sunday, which is the foundation and kernel of the whole liturgical year. So that's the text, right? We talk about this weekly celebration. We're celebrating the resurrection every single week. This idea of it, right? It's this events that around which the world turns. The entire history of all of humanity points to the resurrection. From the very beginning of creation, Genesis, the Big Bang, all the way to the end of time when Jesus comes again, it all points to the resurrection. And that's the important thing, right? So one of the things that might sound a little odd here is it says every 8th day. By the 8th day, it's actually every 7th day. Sunday comes every 7 days. Well, the 8th day here is the idea that that there are 7 days of creation, and then the new recreation starts on the 8th day. And that's the first day, because the Sabbath, the resting day, was Saturday, according to the Jewish reckoning of days. Of Genesis, right? So that's the important. And there is this duty to come together, right? The Sunday obligation, right? You've probably heard it bunches of times, obligation to go to Mass on Sunday, things like that. And that is important, but it's also a thanking God for the gifts, right? The thankfulness, the giftedness, that aspect. And it's the original feast day, freedom from work on this day. This day can be the day which we don't have work. We spend more time with family and friends to celebrate, both to pray and that celebration with God, but also to celebrate together in family and things like that, having a barbecue or something like that. And then it talks about other celebrations. So there are different levels of celebrations. There's solemnities, feast memorials, and optional memorials. Before Vatican II, I think there are more levels, and they're often lesser saints also on Sundays. I don't know the exact details. I just remember some of the priests who were much older than me. They remember when they were in formation, it would seem that they would read the Gospel of the 10 Virgins, wise and foolish virgins, multiple times a week because there'd be so many different sisters there would be, and that would be the Gospel for, all these nuns or religious sisters, apostolic religious sisters like that. So in our 4 levels here, we have the Solemnity, Feast, Memorial, Optional Memorial. The solemnities are most important. Those are things like Christmas, Easter, the Annunciation, the Assumption, the Ascension, things like that are super important, and they have precedence over Sunday. Second are feasts, which are important, but not as important. So the ones of Jesus have precedence. So like, for example, the Transfiguration is only a feast, but it has precedence if that falls on the Sunday there in the beginning of August 6th. But other feasts are not that. Then you have memorials, which everybody is obliged to celebrate if it's not a Sunday, except for very extenuating circumstances. Like there's a whole bunch of saints where, yes, we have to celebrate it that day, but if that day, and then optional memorials are saints you may or may not celebrate. Every day there's really an optional memorial. There's almost 2 levels of optional memorials. There's those listed in the general missal for everybody, and then there's other days for just general, that there's almost every optional memorial basically every day of some saint. Now, with these, the idea of these can vary a little bit place to place. The patron saint of your parish is a solemnity at your parish, even if it's an optional memorial. And then also in communities that can be, like, for example, St. Francis, for all of us, is a memorial. But if you're a Franciscan, depending on which branch of Franciscan, it might be a feast or solemnity. And things like that. So that's the idea. We want to simplify it. We want to focus more on Jesus. We don't want to have like all these saints. There is a value of the saints. We don't just want to have saints and saints and lose track of Jesus, right? And that's really important. And another important thing that really has happened that's kind of related to this is the importance of lay saints, because just the process to get someone canonized meant that most often it was people like bishops, people like founders of religious communities and things like that actually got canonized. But there are many other saints who are just, very simple lay people, or even simple religious or simple diocesan priests, but don't get enough to dedicate the time and effort. And so I think that's one thing that's really beautiful about the more recent things of saints, where we have emphasized, hey, these lay saints, hey, this person was just, a doctor or whatever else. They weren't, some missionary or something. So paragraph 107 is on the main liturgical seasons, and it wants to keep them, right? Advent, Lent, Easter, and Christmas. So let's read it. The liturgical year is to be revised so that the traditional customs and discipline of the sacred seasons shall be preserved or restored to suit the conditions of modern times. The specific character is to be retained, so that they may duly nourish the piety of the faithful who celebrate the mysteries of Christian redemption, and above all, the Paschal mystery. If certain adaptations are considered necessary on account of local customs, they are to be made in accordance with the provisions of Article 39 and 40. Pretty straightforward. Articles 39 and 40 are giving bishop conferences ability to localize the liturgy, and how localized is kind of there. And it's like some of it you can do on your own, some of it you require the Vatican approval for, right? And things like that. And then the same seasons, right? We have, in general, the one thing that was changed is between, the main 4 seasons we talked about, but between Christmas and Lent, and then between Easter and Advent, now we just call it ordinary time. Before it used to be called Sundays after Epiphany, Sundays after, or weeks after Pentecost. The idea of the main seasons was kept, but just those two were combined to be called ordinary time instead of being called after this and after that. I'm not here to argue one or the other is better. I think both have their merits. I just live with what we have. Paragraph 108, Christ-centeredness. And this is something that my own community, the Leaders of Christ, really focused on, that idea of being very Christ-centered. And this is talking about it in the liturgical year, right? This idea I mentioned in the last paragraph, or 2 paragraphs back, not having too many saints and just every single day is a different saint and things like that. I know one of the things that we tend to do different than a lot of other religious communities or diocesan priests. We tend to celebrate less of the optional memorials. I just noticed, like, as far as the way the celebrating, when I've been at events with other priests, like when I was studying one of my degrees, I was a priest and I was living with a bunch of other priests of other communities and dioceses, and they would celebrate almost all the optional memorials, where I'm just used to very few of the optional memorials. I'll celebrate, like Our Lady of Lourdes, a few that have a bit of devotion, a few others, but not most of them. Anyways, let's read 108. The minds of the faithful must be directed primarily towards the feast of the Lord, whereby the mysteries of salvation the mysteries of salvation are celebrated in the course of the year. Therefore, the proper of time shall be given the preference which is due, which it's due over the feast of saints, so the entire cycle of the mysteries of salvation may be recalled. Right? This idea of emphasizing Jesus over the saints. Too many saints got too much time. They're all there, optional. If they're the founder of your religious community, celebrate them. Yeah. Or like they were a big saint in your local area. Great. And this idea of giving life to Jesus through prayer. One of the things here is the proper. So, that would be just before the Eucharistic prayer. There's a prayer there. And during the seasons like Lent and Christmas and Easter, you just say that one, even if it's a feast day of a saint. Whereas, an ordinary time, you say one for virgins or for martyrs or for pastors or something like that. So hopefully that's helpful. Right now, we are done for today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce it and another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow we're going to continue on the next paragraphs of Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is 109 to 111 on Lent and the Saints. This will include chapter 5, and then we'll move on to chapter 6 after tomorrow. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which could be a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan. There is also a SQPN Discord with a channel for Vatican II in a year at sqpn.com/Discord. Amen.